Why that is, I think that this is an art form that has not resonated with the next generation. Part of the reason is I believe that the arts were systematically cut in the late 70s and early 80s, and that as the arts were being cut, we're seeing the supply stream dry up in terms of people participating. I also think that we've defined arts consumption differently today. When you look at things, and there's well over 1 billion downloads on iTunes, so music's being consumed. Everybody can literally have a concert hall with earbuds. But attending live events, whether it's classical, rock, jazz, pop, from Justin Bieber to whoever, all those numbers are down. And those numbers are down, I think, because the live experience has a challenge now of competing against television on demand, large television, you know, the idea of a 60-inch television, to music on a demand at any time. And it's cheap. You know, iTunes is 99 cents for a tune, or free in many cases. And to go to a symphony concert, you have to drive more than 25 miles for most of our audience. You have to pay for parking, buy a ticket, and carve out 3 hours of your life. So it's a bit antiquated in terms of being for the masses. But you know, there are things that can be done systematically to start changing that, and we're starting to do that here at the DS. Yeah, I think it's stuffy. You know, you can always, but in the end, it's lipstick on a pig, and if the pig is the problem, the pig is the problem. I mean, that's not a very great metaphor, but the fact is, you're only dressing up something. If the music isn't good, if the conductor can't communicate and turn around and have a conversation, I mean, it's just so odd to me that you'll go to, you know, let's take Beyonce. You know, she'll go out at the Super Bowl and she sings her heart out. You know, you don't see that playing your heart out physically and emotionally unless it's a soloist like Lang Lang, but the orchestra doesn't have that feel. Sometimes you feel that from the conductor, and what you see and what you feel doesn't line up with what you're hearing. So you have to really help the audience take a leap of imagination, leap into imagination, and that's a difficult thing to do. And people, generally speaking, will have a better time with that if they've actually played an instrument themselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they get it.
I think that a lot has to do with the nature of our media and our enjoyment of various entertainment things. In the olden days, People would tell stories, people would get together and perform something, they would act together, and everything was just based on a person-to-person contact. Whereas now there's a lot of handheld devices that take up consciousness and take up people's attention. There's also a trend that I've heard people mention of attention spans shortening from the previous, Mahler symphonies being an hour and a half long. Now most modern audiences are not acclimated to such lengths, so they wouldn't be able to sit through a performance as well. Popular music, in many senses, is becoming based on beat, I think, and sort of its sole purpose is giving an impulse, giving a beat, whereas people aren't concerned with the melodic ideas as much, the structures in popular fields, and when people don't understand as much about a music, they can't enjoy it as much. So classical music with such refinement is a sort of slipping out of people's fingers because they're more concerned with technology.
One reason could be because of the attention span of our generation, because there's so much stuff going on. Another reason could be just the natural way of the way music works, which is kind of in waves. So in combination with the fact that we have low attention spans, like some people, to be blunt, and I'm not saying I want to be blunt, but if someone were to be blunt, they would say like classical music is dead because of whatever reason, just because we move on from things.
Yeah, they were raised with it, but we weren't. So it's not relevant to our generation. Not relevant, but like...
I think we were.
We were, but like anyone else, yeah, or like most other people weren't.
Yeah.
So they don't see how cool it is and think it's just really long, uninteresting music.
Our concerts are really long.
Yeah.
Even
people
though they're
like
free,
things like fast.
Yeah.
Really short.
So people of our generation just need exposure to classical music, and then they will like it because it's exciting, and it's not all 50 favorites before breakfast, like relaxing music. I think that's a part of the stereotype, is that it's relaxing and boring, but it's really not. It's thrilling.
One can deduce any number of factors. The general stuffiness of the atmosphere, the formality of it. All of this is true to a degree, but I think that perhaps more important is the loss of a sense that when you're growing up in a family, that sitting around, in my day, listening to a record player was a pleasant way to spend an evening. And were you concentrating on the music? No. You're letting your mind wander, you're reading books. But when I was growing up, it wasn't a foregone conclusion that you're going to spend the whole evening in front of a screen of some sort. You'd probably put on a Toscanini recording of this or that Beethoven symphony or the Franck D minor, and there was your evening. Or you listened to Vladimir Horowitz play, and There was your evening, and you'd be reading, you'd be doing other things, but it was just part of the environment that you were growing up with. And I suspect it's probably a rare household that does that as a matter of course anymore, because parents find it far easier just to park kids in front of computer screens and let them develop the minute attention spans and the easy distractibility that often seems to foster. Read a novel while listening to Schubert, and you have a different kind of upbringing.
I think the primary one is the disjunct in cultures, ultimately. I think we take it for granted. We've been educated to like that music. It's required in education to like that music. And that's great. I think that one of the purposes of education is to teach people how to enjoy more as opposed to less. So that's fantastic. But at the same time, along with our educations, where we have gained a respect and an appreciation for that type of music and that cultural experience, I think it has also, I think it often places blinders on us and makes us forget that this is in fact not a normal experience. It is not of our culture. It is not of our country. It is not of our time. And those factors make a huge difference in how someone experiences something like a musical concert. What they're not able to tap into is how this music resonates with them on a personal level. For me, I'm a doctoral student. I've studied this stuff a lot, feverishly the past couple of years. And in the process, I've kind of disenthralled myself a little bit from the classical music culture so that I can kind of see it from the outside. At the very least, see it from the outside better than I could before. And the last orchestral concert I went to, I couldn't even hear music. All I heard was culture. I heard stuff coming at me that was from a radically different place in time. I heard aristocracy. I heard nobility. I heard men in white wigs, people wearing knickers. It's like, that's what I heard. And I think, arguably, that's closer to a typical experience that a non-classical music goer might have. They hear this music and it's like, what does this have to do with it? This is old. This is music for rich people in 1850. What does this have to do with it?
We're the only major orchestra in the United States that has webcasting. So all of our DSO concerts are free and online, so you can consume it free. Number two, we have community concerts where we take the DSO out to very strategic locations throughout the community. And so the barrier of transportation has been lowered. The type of programming that we do, we have a music director, Leonard Slacken, who has a very, he understands what the audiences want to listen to, so he'll balance things out with a healthy dose of Tchaikovsky with new music. So everything's very market driven. And then our educational programs, putting instruments back into children's hands and then being viral in terms of music learning with those kids and their parents. So those are kind of the big things that we're doing. I don't think there's a silver bullet that's going to solve everything. I think you have to try a lot of different things. And I think that we have to redefine what a symphony orchestra is. I mean, I think if our expectations are that it's going to be a symphony orchestra like Leonard Bernstein in 1970 with full halls, sitting in front of children that are going to sit with their hands on their laps listening to music very quietly, I think you're always going to fail that expectation. I think cultural institutions, and symphony orchestras are cultural institutions. They need to serve the community. They need to be economic drivers. They need to be able to be diversified in their offerings, not just music, but the type of music, from jazz to pop to presentations, to a facility that's able to rent things, to an educational institution, and have that community connectedness so that there's not a question of why does it matter. It matters because it's a multi-dimensional platform in which it sits.
Understanding what classical music culture is like and sort of how it fits within contemporary society. And that is an analogy of the Civil War Battle Reenactment Club. And that they get together on the weekends and they dress up in period clothing and they use period weapons and they have a good old time. And the thing about that is they know they're engaging in a niche experience. They don't expect everybody to show up. It's just like, well, we're a Civil War Battle Reenactment Club. Like, you know, we don't deserve funding or anything. We don't expect the government to give us money. We don't really even expect people to buy tickets. We just do this for fun. And it's weird. You know, the fact that we're obsessed with Civil War battle reenactments, but we do it anyway and we like it. The problem is that classical music culture is in many ways like that Civil War battle reenactment club, except they don't understand that it's a niche product, or they're unwilling to admit that. And that's difficult to swallow because claiming that simultaneously says, it simultaneously slaps those in the face who claim that, you know, music is somehow like this universal language. I think one of the biggest problems is that our educational system and our arts institutions, orchestras of course included, are designed in a particular model. And that model is a fixed one. It's static. And this last year's orchestra summit, which Professor Blake set up, I kept on hearing people talk about new models. Like, what's the new model going forward that we can somehow use and implement? And I kept on thinking to myself, you don't need a new model. The only model you can possibly rely on, and perhaps the most effective one, is that of adaptability. You need to create an organization which can effectively change on a whim without getting anybody pissed off about it. That includes your donors, that includes your managers, that includes your musicians. The bottom line is people don't want to change, they want to maintain. Civil War Battle Reenactment Club doesn't want to change, they want to keep reenacting the Civil War battles. So again, it's a hard thing to accept. But I think that's the model. What if, for example, everyone suddenly realized, all your fellow students and whatnot, sort of came to this jarring realization that what they were doing more closely resembled like a Civil War battle reenactment club. Like, what if they, it's like, whoa. I think they would start to change. They would change the way they engaged their practices. They would be forced, not necessarily forced, but I think they would begin to think about their relationship with their art a little differently, and their relationship with culture a little differently. And as a result of those realizations about themselves, and the realizations they would have about their own relationship to classical music, I think that would instigate the most meaningful change.
To answer your question, open bar.